Hey, good morning. So we're here very early today. We're gonna be doing a lot of things. There's a lot of things I have to go over with the script, so stand by. We do have to talk about the mythological parallels. I've got my notes, so we should be good to go. And then yeah, this should be a relatively good stream. So let me just read this over again, and we'll see how things are. It's gonna be 1 second. I'm getting everything up. So yes, I do have my notes. They're on my note-taking iPad, so we should be good with all the mythological parallels. So give me 1 second. We'll read this from the beginning to the end. Well, up until what we have. Just give me a second. I literally just woke up like an hour ago, so I'm still kind of drowsy. So just give me a sec. Let's see. Okay. Da 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 da. All right. Oh. This is a kind of fear that doesn't scream. It lingers. It waits. You stand in an empty room. The walls don't move. The stillness feels crowded. You don't hear footsteps, but your heart begins to race because you know you're not alone. Whenever you feel someone's watching you, it's because someone probably is. Charles Bukowski. Bukowski wasn't warning us about monsters. He was naming a truth older than language. The fear of being watched isn't irrational. It's instinct. That beneath paranoia is a memory very deep within the nervous system that tells us the gaze is never neutral. It judges, it invades. Horror games don't need claws or teeth to terrify us. They just need eyes, unblinking and unrelenting. Because when we are being watched, we are no longer safe. We are no longer ourselves. We become performant. We become prey. In this video, we are tracing that ancient fear through the myths of Medusa, Amaterasu, and Ra, through neuroscience and surveillance culture, accumulating into 3 case studies. So I'm gonna change this to The Arrival. Just because I feel like The Arrival would probably be a little bit better. So we're changing this to The Arrival. 3 case studies in Slender, The Arrival, Silent Hill 3, and Resident Evil Village. Horror doesn't just make us fear what we see, it makes us dread what it sees us, and what it might already know. Because sometimes the most terrifying presence is the one that never moves, never speaks, only watches. Before surveillance cameras, before monitors and blinking red lights, there were eyes in the dark, watching beyond the light. That's still pretty cringe, so I might end up changing that. And we feared them. The human relationship with gaze is primal. Long before language, eye contact signaled dominance. So pretty much me staring directly in your eyes could be seen as me asserting myself over you. Which is why whenever you're dealing with a ferocious beast like a bear, they tell you stare it right directly in the eyes. Results may vary, of course, but that's where that saying comes on. If you ever encounter a bear in the forest, stare it down directly into his eyes. It may intimidate it, which I don't know about that one. Definitely don't know about that one. Okay. So let's see. So the human relationship with gaze is primal. Long before language, eye contact signaled dominance, submission, and threat. A stare wasn't just observation. It was a challenge, a warning, a countdown. Ancient cultures turned that fear into symbol and story. The eye of providence, a triangle of divinity and judgment, watching from above, sacred in design, oppressive in implication. The all-seeing eye that sees what you hide, not what you know. So the conspiracy eye, if you're not familiar with the eye of providence. The eye of Horus, a mark of protection but also surveillance. A god's gaze that follows you into the depth of your soul. My favorite one, the evil eye, a cursed eye, passed through glance, based through time in different cultures, feared because it demanded nothing but to destroy you. Just being watched isn't enough. Evil eye is a funny Yu-Gi-Oh archetype. So, horror inherits this mythology, but it strips it of its divinity. The eye becomes corrupted. The gaze of ancient watchers doesn't offer guidance, it exposes. In horror games, this is where it begins. Not with the scream, but with the feeling that something ancient, unseen, and impossible. Hold on. I fucked that up. With the feeling that something ancient, unseen, and impossibly patient. That's why. Alright. This is why I proofread, just in case. Because there are times I just write stuff that just makes absolutely no sense. Alright. But with the feeling that something ancient, unseen, and impossibly patient is watching you, and you'll never look away. The fear of being watched isn't just story superstition. It is written into the very wiring of the brain. Deep within your skull is the amygdala. Well, we talked about the amygdala plenty of times. It's the little tiny object in your brain, which is the fear center. This is the fear center within your brain. It can react instantly to eyes, not just real eyes, but shapes that look like eyes, faces, portraits, statues, and even mannequins can set off that ancient alarm. This response is automatic, involuntary, and designed to prepare the body for a fight or flight even before the conscious thought arises. Long before civilization, before language, before societies and laws, our ancestors relied on their senses to survive. In the gaze, eyes meeting eyes was one of the most primal signals of danger, but it doesn't stop there. Our brains can sometimes misinterpret this warning. For example, it can react to eyes that aren't real, such as paintings and portraits. So we gave the example with old school Scooby-Doo cartoons. Well, they'll be in the mansion of the day. There'll be a very stern looking painting, very like intimidating looking painting. They notice it, but pay no mind because it's just a painting. They'll walk right by it, and the eyes follow the directions. So that type of thing. All right. For example, it can react to eyes that aren't real, such as painted eyes in portraits. The glassy eyes of mannequins or the frozen gaze of statues. This can cause intense responses in a person ranging from distress to panic. Cortisol, the hormone tied to stress and anxiety, rises when people are exposed to paintings with censored, focused eyes. The brain interprets these images as silent watchers. In a similar sense, people have reported a sensation of dread and discomfort when looking at mannequins and dolls. Me specifically, I hate mannequins. I cannot stand mannequins. Mannequins are... It's just the blank expression that just always gets to me with them. Give me a sec. Alright. Horror games expertly expose this neurological wiring with a chilling finesse. Consider the portraits whose eyes appear to follow you. The subtle animation or design tricks mimics the gaze's perspective. No matter where you look, the eyes seem to always fixate on you, so pretty much following your movements. Unnerving the player with a sense of inescapable scrutiny. The invisible watcher, the anticipation of observation, is the beginning of true horror. It plays on our nervous system's oldest fear, the dread of being seen before you're ready, and before you can defend yourself. It is in this space between knowing and guessing that horror games create their profound terror. The fear of being watched evolved around us, but it found a new, darker expression in the age of surveillance. Long before our world was filled with cameras, computers, and algorithms, George Orwell crystallized this terror in a single phrase: Big Brother is watching you. Read 1984. In 1984, Big Brother was an omnipresent, faceless force of control, an eye that never blinked, a gaze that never tired. Today, Orwell's vision is no longer fiction. It is our reality. Streets, stores, even our homes are blanketed with CCTV cameras. Our faces are cataloged by facial recognition systems. Every click, swipe, and even purchase can feed into these networks. Every movement is recorded, indexed, and analyzed. This modern surveillance is a paradox. We accept it as necessary for safety, yet it erodes the very privacy that once protected us. In horror games, this becomes a nightmare. Surveillance shifts from guardian to protector. Cameras don't protect, they expose. In horror games, cameras may flicker or distort, revealing faces that shouldn't be there, watchers who don't abide by the rules of reality. A prime example would be Alma from the Fear series, specifically Fear 1 and more so Fear 1 than Fear 2, but definitely Fear 1. Whenever the screen whenever you see like a weird distortion, like a flicker or static, you know she's around. In a sense, the safe zone becomes a trap. Monitors can also betray. Screens meant to secure you, glitch or lag, showing impossible images or failing at the worst moment. Trust breaks down. The eye that watches can also lie. This betrayal is deeply unsettling because it destroys the illusion of control. Instead of safety, surveillance becomes a slow, creeping violation. You're not just being watched. You're being profiled, tracked, and known. Horror games make you feel this loss of control in ways that resonate with real-world fears. The tools designed to protect become instruments of powerlessness. We've done a video on powerlessness before. Check it out. You can't hide, can't escape. The watcher is everywhere and nowhere. This reality turns the fear of the gaze into a systemic horror. Not a monster hunting in the shadows, but an invisible machine just watching. Dread isn't what the watcher will do and what the watcher will do next. It isn't the certainty that they will always be watching. To be watched is not merely to be observed. It is to have your very self fractured beneath the gaze. When the eye lingers, it wraps your perception. The world slows down. Actions become measured and tentative. Every movement is filtered through the invisible observer's judgment. You are no longer acting freely. You perform. This is the psychological blast that horror games capture with haunting clarity. Under constant surveillance, people begin to self-police. Innocent actions become suspect. Minor missteps twist into grave sins. I gave the horror movie example with this with Scream. So Sidney Prescott is anti-meta. Like she called out the fact that usually the females or victims, we choose prefer the females. They're usually they're stupid. Instead of running out the perfectly fine front door, they'll run upstairs, which is kind of ironic because when she was getting chased by Stu, she ran upstairs. There was some funny irony there. So fear seeps in. Not just she ran upstairs because of the fear of the situation, so, but pretty much what that sentence ties into over there. Fear seeps in, not just fear of what watches you, but what it knows about you. Horror games stimulate this descent with mechanics that force moral ambiguity, guilt, and hesitation. The player hesitates before making a choice, paralyzed by doubt, each decision being weighed down by the consequences. This is no longer a fight against the antagonist, but against yourself. The gaze turns inward. The terror of exposure becomes the terror of self-exposure. What if the watcher sees your weakness, your lies, your shame? What if you are no longer the master of your own identity? The horror deepens when the gaze becomes internalized. The player becomes a prisoner in their own minds, an unwilling actor on a stage where every move is scrutinized. James. The watched lose more than their privacy, but their sense of self. In horror, this strips away of power, replaces certainty with doubt, and leaves the player caught in a spiral of paranoia and despair. Hold on. Give me one sec. Alright. These old eyes of mine. In a terrifying world of horror, the gaze is an expressive force acting upon you, but some games twist this dynamic completely, handing you the power of surveillance. And with a new kind of horror, you become the watcher. At first, this seems like control, the ability to observe your environment through security cameras, video monitors, and other surveillance tools. You scan hallways, check blind corners, and track movements on static-filled screens. This power feels like safety, like you're the one in control, but you're actually not. Where was I? The illusion cracks because watching doesn't mean you're safe. The more you peer into darkness through grainy cameras, the more you understand the futility of your watchfulness. I was going kind of cringy with that one. I can probably change that later. Figures begin to appear in places they shouldn't. Again, Alma, or any Fatal Frame stalker ghost. Figures begin to appear in places they shouldn't. Ghostly half-seen shapes flicker on broken monitors. Shadows darting just outside the camera's range. Sounds echoing behind you, even though you're the one observing. You realize that the gaze you hold is incomplete and fragile. It betrays you with dead zones, glitches, and sudden blind spots. Your ability to see is limited, yet your responsibility to watch never ends. This becomes a paradox. You are the observer, but also the observed. Suddenly, you become part of the surveillance itself, trapped inside of a feedback loop of observation and paranoia. The very act of watching becomes a source of vulnerability. You begin to question your own sight, your own perception. Are you truly in control, or is the gaze controlling you? In this existential terror, horror games force you to confront your own fragility and the illusion of control. They reveal that to be free is to be bound by the watcher's eye endlessly, both inside and out. The fear of being watched is not always what you see. Sometimes it lies in what you can't see. Imagine walking into a room where everything appears silent and still. No eyes meet yours, no figures lurking in the shadows, yet an oppressive feeling presses down, a sensation that you're being observed by something that refuses to reveal itself. This is the domain of the unseen watcher, a gaze without a face, a presence without a body. It is the very essence of cosmic horror, the awareness that you're not being observed by a creature or a spirit, but an unknowable, indifferent force beyond human comprehension. It is this kind of horror the watcher isn't an enemy, but can outright confront you. Oh, my injury's starting to get me good right now. Like, I'm starting to stutter and slur a little bit, but it happens from time to time. It does. It's just the unfortunate consequence of getting hurt. It watches you and knows everything, and it knows everything. There's no escape, no refuge. The horror here is existential. It strips away the comforting illusion that observation requires eyes or attention. You realize that to be watched and not always to be seen. It means to be at the mercy of an invisible gaze that demands nothing but your awareness. The psychological weight of this realization crushes hope. It turns every shadow into a potential danger zone. In horror games, this concept is conveyed through environmental design, ambiguous sound cues, and narratives that leave the watcher's identity deliberately vague or absent. The unseen watcher doesn't need to act. Its mere presence is enough to shatter reality. It's always present, never responding, never blinking. It is the eye that never closes. Movement commands attention. It signals threat, but sometimes it is stillness the absence of action that creates the deepest dread. In many horror games, figures lurk in the distance or appear in your peripheral vision, yet they do not move. Not just monsters, but environmental objects can instill fear into the player. Statues, shadowy figures, or faces frozen in place do nothing but watch. Imagine standing alone in a dark hallway. At the far end, a figure stands unmoving, eyes locked onto you. You wait for it to approach, to attack, to make any movement at all, but it simply stands. It is waiting for you to come closer. It is waiting for you to come closer. Has it already decided your fate, or does your very presence satisfy it? The stillness transforms the watcher from predator to judge. The horror is no longer about physical harm, but psychological torment. Sorry. I need to put these back on. You're trapped in a moment where nothing happens, but everything is implied. Horror games use this by crafting environments where the threat lingers silently, which forces player to wrestle with uncertainty, anticipation, and dread. So, a good example of this would be Silent Hill 2 original, when you're first introduced to Pyramid Head in the hallway. Just the metal grate is separating James from Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head's just standing there, and I quote menacingly. Pun totally intended there. This is where I'm getting at. Hold on. Sorry. Because the worst type of fear is the fear of the unknown. In a sense, the gaze does not act. The gaze that does not act is the gaze that condemns. Alright, I need to put like a... Let's see. Right there's good. Just so I can know I need to pause right there. The fear of being watched is a universal human experience, but how that fear manifests is deeply shaped by cultural perspectives, history, and context. Horror games, like all storytelling mediums, absorb these cultural influences and reflect them back. This molds the watcher's gaze to distinct worldviews that resonate on personal levels. In Western horror, the fear of being watched can spring from anxieties about control, the loss of privacy, and the insidious reach of technology. The gaze, in a sense, can be seen as mechanical, institutional, and cold. Western horror games reflect this by placing players in worlds filled with surveillance systems, stalkers that can exploit technology, or AI that can access and punish human actions. So I gave a good example of this yesterday with Code Veronica. Wesker utilizing, he releases the cameras / hunters, but the cameras will always try to pinpoint Chris's location and summon a hunter towards him. So that's a prime example right there. The Watcher can be seen as a symbol of invasion, an external force imposing its will while stripping away autonomy and safety. Contrast this with Eastern horror, where the fear of being watched is shown with layers of shame, judgment, and spiritual reckoning. Here, the Watcher is merely a faceless authority. Here, the Watcher is rarely a faceless authority or machine. It is often a ghost, a spirit, or divine presence that is immediately tied to the world. In these narratives, being watched means being seen through your deepest secrets, your failings, and your sins. The gaze carries the weight of accountability, a reckoning that transcends the physical realm. Horror games in the East explore the themes of cursed bloodlines, lingering grudges, and divine retribution, where the Watcher is a force reminding you that you cannot hide from who you are and what others have done. So, a good example would be, again, Fatal Frame as usual, Siren, more so White Day 2001? It's 2001, 2002. It's one of them. It's been a bit. It's probably 2002. The original White Day, the remake of the original, I'm very indifferent about the follow-up game because I never played it. I just it was out while I was on while I was like deployed somewhere. So I came back. I'm like, wait, there's another White Day. What the fuck? Then I saw it was a multi-part game instead of being a single entry. I'm like, oh. Then I saw a walkthrough of it. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, this is not the White Day I know, but oh well. Okay. So I like the way this sounds. There's a couple of extra things I can add to this section. Then we can move to the parallels. Just give me a moment. I have not had breakfast. I just came right to this. All right. Sorry, I'm dealing with some other stuff in the background. So, okay. So we can give some more examples of this. The fear of being, I gotta read this again. So the fear of being watched is a universal human experience, but how that fear manifests is deeply shaped by cultural perspectives, perspectives, history, and context. Horror games, like all storytelling mediums, observe these cultural influences and reflect them back. This molds the watcher's gaze into distinct worldviews that resonate on personal levels. In Western horror, the fear of being watched can spring from anxieties about control, the loss of privacy, and the insidious reach of technology. The gaze, in a sense, can be seen as mechanical, institutional, and cold. Western horror games reflect this by placing players filled with surveillance cameras, surveillance systems, stalkers who can exploit technology, or AI that can assess and punish human actions. The Watcher can be seen as a symbol of invasion, an external force imposing its will while stripping away autonomy and safety. Contrast this with Eastern horror, where the fear of being watched is shown with layers of shame, judgment, and spiritual reckoning. Here, the Watcher is rarely a faceless authority or machine. It is often a ghost, a spirit, or divine presence that is immediately tied to the game world. In these narratives, being watched means being seen through your deepest secrets, your failings, and your sins. The gaze carries on the weight of accountability, a reckoning that transcends the physical realm. Horror games in the East explore themes of cursed bloodlines, lingering grudges, and divine retribution, where the Watcher is a force reminding you that you cannot hide from what you are or what you have done. Okay, I gotta give an example of that. So let me take out my notebook. Cover your ears. Okay. There's a crap ton of things I need to write for my notes. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Okay. What's Eastern horror? In regards to Eastern horror, we can mention Fatal Frame a bit. Yeah, Fatal Frame. Forbidden Siren's a good one. Forbidden Siren. So we can mention White Day. So I did more so for Western horror. White Day 1 and 2. There's Fatal Frame. Fatal Frame. Fatal Frame more so deals with divine retribution. And themes of prejudice. With lingering resentment. Yep. Where the Watcher is a force reminding that you cannot hide for what you are, for who you are, and what others have done. No, we don't need to. No, we don't need to do that because we'd have to do it for the other one. So let's see. Where the Watcher is, of course, reminding you that you cannot hide from who you are, what you others have done. Shit. Hmm. Just give me a second to think here. Hmm. Like, there's a lot I can write. It's just I need to figure out how the hell to actually put this here. Because I don't want to. I'm not including games this time around in my examples because I don't want to take away from the case studies. Give me 1 second. With the Watchers, of course, money that you cannot hide from what you are, what others are done. So. Explain cultures. Explain cultures not only shapes the story, not only shapes the story in symbolism. Display in cultures shapes not only. I'm a dumbass. Display in culture shapes not only story and symbolism. Also gameplay mechanics. Display in culture shapes not only story and symbolism, but also gameplay mechanics. us. Give me a second. While Eastern horror favors fear, haunted relics and crest-friendly heirlooms that okay. I'm gonna word this in a specific way. So give me like a couple minutes here. Let's try a different angle here. The world they inhibits. All right. All right. Let me read this whole thing over again. I think this is good for this section. Okay. Fear of being watched is a universal human experience. How that fear manifests is deeply shaped by cultural perspectives, history, and context. Horror games, like all storytelling mediums, observe these cultural influences and reflect them back. This molds the watcher's gaze to distinct worldviews that resonate on personal levels. In Western horror, the fear of being watched can spring from anxieties about control, the loss of privacy, and the insidious reach of technology. The gaze, in a sense, can be seen as mechanical, institutional, and cold. Western horror games reflect this by placing players in worlds filled with surveillance systems, stalkers who can exploit technology, or AI that can assess and punish human actions. The Watcher can be seen as a symbol of invasion, an external force imposing its will while stripping away autonomy and safety. Contrast this with Eastern horror, where the fear of being watched is shown with layers of shame, judgment, and spiritual reckoning. Here, here the Watcher is rarely a faceless authority or machine. It's often a ghost or a spirit or a divine presence that is immediately tied to the world. In these narratives, being watched means being seen through your deepest secrets, your failings, and your sins. The gaze carries on the weight of accountability, a reckoning that transcends the physical realm. Horror games in the East explore themes of cursed bloodlines, lingering grudges, and divine retribution, where the Watcher is a force reminding you that you cannot hide from who you are or what you have done. This split in cultures shapes not only story and symbolism, but also gameplay mechanics. Western horror emphasizes technology. Western horror emphasizes. Oops. Let me put this there. Western horror emphasizes technology, surveillance cameras, and AI systems, while Eastern horror favors fear, haunted relics, and cursed family heirlooms that embody the Watcher's presence. Horror games. I'm gonna actually have to change that. I'm gonna change that. Horror games harness these distinct fears that to make the experience that. Oh my god! Excuse me. Probably have to take my medicine soon. Horror games harness these distinct fears to make experiences that feel both universal and personal. This invites players to confront the Watcher as shaped by the world they inhabit. Yeah, I'll probably have to take my medicine. Jesus Christ. Alright. Horror. While Eastern horror favors fear, favors fear. Psychological torment and favorite fear, psychological torment. Because what we had before is true, it's definitely true, but we need to make sure it's something that's common in every, like, almost every, like, Eastern game. So unfortunately we can't give like specific examples like that. Give me a second. I gotta take my medicine. This happens from time to time. Just give me one moment. All right, sorry about that. From time to time, that does happen. It's my wound on my chest is still recovering, but once I start like slurring and like stuttering like crazy, it's just acting up. It's just something that I'm happy I'm not. So just I'm happy I'm not. Psychological torment. I'm using grudge just because that is definitely a common thing, and more so, yeah, it's a common thing in a lot of like Eastern games. This invites players to confront the Watcher as shape as the world they inhabit. Yeah. All right. I apologize, but I definitely got to read this over again. So I know people are getting tired of my voice. I'm just gazing at this one more time. Give me a second. Fuck. So far, it looks good. Okay. The fear of being watched is a universal human experience, but how that fear manifests is deeply shaped by cultural perspectives, history, and context. Horror games, like all storytelling mediums, observe these cultural influences and reflect them back. This molds the watcher's gaze to distinct worldviews that resonate on personal levels. In Western horror, the fear of being watched can spring from anxieties about control, the loss of privacy, and the insidious reach of technology. The gaze, in a sense, can be seen as mechanical, institutional, and cold. Western horror games reflect this by placing players in worlds filled with surveillance systems, stalkers who can exploit technology, or AI that can assess and punish human actions. The Watcher can be seen as a symbol of invasion, an external force imposing its will while stripping away autonomy and safety. Contrast this with Eastern horror, where the fear of being watched is shown with layers of shame, judgment, and spiritual reckoning. Here, the Watcher is rarely a faceless authority or machine. It is often a ghost, a spirit, or divine presence that is immediately tied to the world. In these narratives, being watched means being seen through your deepest secrets, your failings, and your sins. The gaze carries on the weight of accountability, a reckoning that transcends the physical realm. Horror games in the East explore themes of cursed bloodlines, lingering grudges, and divine retribution, where the Watcher is a force reminding you that you cannot hide from who you are and what others have done. This split in culture shapes not only story and symbolism, but also gameplay and mechanics. Western horror emphasizes technology, surveillance cameras, and AI enemies, while Eastern horror favors fear, psychological torment, and grudges that embody the Watcher's presence. Horror games harness these distinct fears to make experiences that feel both universal and personal. This invites players to confront the Watcher as shaped by the world they inhabit. Give me one sec. Fucking hell! Oh my god! Give me like 1 second. Okay. There's a lot of background stuff happening, so I'm kind of like juggling like 50 different things at the moment. But sorry about that. Yeah, but damn, this is really kicking my ass right now. I might have to actually take a break to actually see what's going on, but we'll see. So I think this is fine. Okay. All right. So let me take a break. We're gonna come back, and I believe we're gonna be talking about the mythological parallel. So I'll get my notes out. I'll review them one more time. I'll go see what's going on, but chest is definitely acting up. So we'll see. I'm not gonna go to the hospital. I'm not gonna go to the hospital, but definitely I'm gonna see like what's going on. Besides that, good shit. We streamed for like like almost an hour, and I'll try to do another stream later. Have a good one. I'll see you.